right, greetings everyone. We are watching you filter in and so happy to be with you on this March evening, one of the last evenings of March. Thank you so much. Wonderful to see you, everybody. Welcome to the inaugural program of the Emily Dickinson Museum's new reading series, Phosphorescence. Now, there's a word to lift your hat to find that phosphorescence, that light within. That's the genius behind poetry. That's what Emily Dickinson had to say about phosphorescence. This series of virtual readings runs monthly now through December of this year, and we are bringing you a whole bevy of poets. I wonder what the actual plural noun for poets is. There must be a very good one. We'll have to look that up for next time. A bevy of poets working in a diversity of styles from a wide range of personal backgrounds and tuning in from around the world, but all bringing you that light within that we think you'll want to lift your hat to. We will have the chance to hear their work and also to be in conversation with them around both contemporary poetry and Emily Dickinson's legacy. My name is Brooke Steinhauser. I am the program director at the Emily Dickinson Museum. I'm here tonight with my colleague, Elizabeth Bradley, our education programs manager.
Hello, so glad to be here this evening.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And we at the museum, thank you for tuning in. We're so excited for tonight's program. Before we begin, I have a request from our featured poets. Tonight, they're going to be sharing work on themes of home, isolation, community, and belonging. And they would like to hear from you, our audience tonight. So we're hoping that using your chat feature, perhaps you could take a moment now to just tell us in a few words, what have you most appreciated about your home in the past year? So as you're thinking about that, you can you'll probably see others start to put that in the chat, and I'll just repeat that question. If you're just joining us, you're having the opportunity to share with our poets who are reading tonight your thinking about in just a few words what you have most appreciated about your home in the past year. So while you're doing that, I will mention that there will also be time at the end of the program for you to address your questions to these wonderful poets. So to do that, we'll ask you to use the Q&A function, which is at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So that's a great place to address your questions as we go. And Elizabeth and I will be helping to facilitate a Q&A at the end, a conversation with our poets. Our full program should last just about 1 hour. So without further ado, it's my delight and honor to introduce the three featured poets who are with us tonight. I'm going to introduce them all to you at the start of things, and then they're going to read consecutively one after the other. So first off, we have Amy Dryansky, and Amy is coming to us from Conway, Massachusetts, so just up the road from Amherst, not far away at all. Amy has published 2 poetry collections. The second, Grass Whistle by Salmon Poetry, received the Massachusetts Book Award. Her first, How I Got Lost So Close to Home, won the New England and New York Award from Alice James. Her work is included in several anthologies, and individual poems appear in Harvard Review, New England Review, Memorious, Orion, The Sun, Tin House, and other journals. She's received honors from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, MacDowell Colony, and the Bread Loaf Writers Conference, and is a former poet laureate of Northampton, Massachusetts. She directs the Culture and Brain and Development program at Hampshire College. You can learn more about her at amydryansky.com. Then up, we have W. Todd Kaneko, is the author of This Is How the Bone Sings by Black Lawrence Press, 2020, and The Dead Wrestler Elegies, which came out just this year, actually. And he's a co-author of with Amarak Huey of Poetry, A Writer's Guide and Anthology by Bloomsbury Academic. That just came out a couple of years ago. And Slash Slash, which was the winner of the 2021 Diode Editions Chapbook Contest. His work has appeared in Poetry, Alaskan Quarterly Review, the Norman School, Barrel House, Diagram, and other places. A Kundiman Fellow, he lives with his family in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where he's coming from today, and teaches at Grand Valley State University. You can learn more about Todd at toddkaneko.com. And finally, Teri Ellen Cross Davis is the author of A More Perfect Union, awarded the 2019 journal Charles B. Wheeler Poetry Prize, and Haight, awarded the 2017 Ohioana Book Award for Poetry. She is the winner of the Poetry Society of America's 2020 Robert H. Winter Memorial Award, and she has received fellowships and scholarships to Cave Canem, the Virginia Center for Creative Arts, Hedgebrook, Community of Writers Poetry Workshop, the Fine Arts Work Center in Provincetown, the Hermitage Artist Retreat, and the Swanee Writers Conference. She is the poetry coordinator for the Folger Shakespeare Library in Washington, D.C. Find out more about Teri at poetsandparents.com. So thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to turn it right over to Amy.
Wow, thanks, Brooke, and thanks, Elizabeth, and thank you so much, Todd and Teri, for being here tonight and reading with me. I'm loving seeing all the stuff coming in on the chat, the greetings and the answers and where everybody is from. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm going to start reading from Grass Whistle, and unlike, I'm not as organized as some others, so I'm actually reading from a book. And the first poem I'm going to read, as Brooke mentioned, when we were thinking about this reading, we were thinking about home and what home means to all of us, the different things that home means to all of us, and also about Dickinson and Dickinson's home and the homestead. So I'm going to start with a poem that I think speaks a lot to sort of childhood and that sense of discovery. The poem is set in the city. I grew up in a city, but in the middle of the block where we lived, there was actually an open field with these cherry trees that somehow people had forgotten about. So if you walk down these stairs, you would discover them. And it seemed magical to me when I was a kid. So this poem sort of speaks to that, but also what we don't understand or what we don't know when we are children. It's called The Bed Was Made. The bed was made. Start here on the blistering front stoop. Purple trumpets of hosta in bloom, flattened yard, milk delivered to a box by the door. Follow the narrow walk, frost heaved, cracked, unskatable, past the skinny tree, unclimbable, and a line of bushes to catch trash blowing by. Turn left and left again. Through lilacs, an opening, a few rough steps down, tall grass, sky, depth and breadth. Stand here on a September late afternoon. A perimeter of lit windows, neighbors, your friends' parents, ordinary and strange. Her mother ate crackers steeped in milk. His father kept photographs locked in a drawer. Her father kept her home as long as he could. Good intentions, tangle of bittersweet, scent of wild grape. No one tried to explain, not yet. No one said, start here, this is the beginning. So the next one I'm going to read says, there's something in the chat, can you please allow the speaker to something? Can you see what that says?
I do see that. So it sounds like someone's hoping to see you in speaker view, and I would recommend to that person to go up to the top right of their screen and select speaker view. So
I just want to make sure the sound was working. So the next poem I'm going to read is from a different perspective. It's as a parent, and you know, your world changes dramatically. Those of you who are parents know this when you become a parent. And I ridiculously was one of those parents who kept trying to impose order, like in my children's environment, which is useless. Like, it's just ridiculous. So my daughter especially resented this intrusion into her world. And it's her voice that you'll hear in this poem asking this question, which is really a demand in a way. It's called In the Treehouse. I empty the rusty teapot of blue water, mud, and leaves. Retrieve pink teacups from the sandbox. Play food strewn through the woods. I put cups back on their hooks. Arrange ham beside pepper, cabbage, and egg. I would live here forever. But as I sweep sand from the burners on the painted toy stove, sand my 6-year-old calls fire, why can't you just leave it? I remember this house is hers, and I have to give it back. Leave a little fire on the stove, the sink, fire even on the floor. Why can't you just leave it? Really, that should be my mantra. The next poem I'm going to read is called Room to Move. And I think the only thing you have to know about this, I mention a meadow with ragged robin, buttercup, and sedges. So wildflowers, if you're not familiar with all those wildflowers. Ragged robin is one of my favorite wildflowers. Room to move. Beginning with the house where a girl my daughter says is mean to her lives, that I'm trying not to dislike because she's 10. And it signifies nothing, this meanness, except she's hurt, like we all are at that age, every age. And I'm too old for that. Except their dog came barking out of the yard and hung there growling. And even though I called the dog by name and the door stood open, no one came. And I couldn't help thinking, yep, yours is the kind of family that lets the dog bark, that doesn't nip anything in the bud. And then I was late for the funeral, and though I didn't love the man who died, I do love his wife and could see the back of her crying body. And I remembered, I've done this too many times, and people will do it for me. My children will bury me. And I started to feel as if I'd run out of room in my chest, a disturbance that hasn't entirely ceased. But I had to pick up my kids and meet a woman who would show me houses I might like better than the house we live in now. So I asked the kids to behave, knowing full well one could do this and one almost certainly could not. And we looked at houses, studios, patios, fancy appliances, and the last had a meadow with drifts of ragged robin, buttercup, and sedges, and the wind making it all move. And I got that happiness that occurs when there's nothing but sky over me. And my daughter felt it too. And my boy, as usual, found something dangerous to climb. But it was time to touch the woman on the arm and say, thanks, no, the house is too expensive. And the kids got loud. And I began to think about dinner and who was going to make it. And when we got in the car, my daughter said she wished we were rich. And I thought of a celebrity I like who got busted for crack again. One of those child stars who get famous so fast, there's nowhere left to go. And then I had to get back quick to the place we filled up with us, made home. Switching. A little sip after a long poem. So I'm going to read just one poem from my first book, How I Got Lost So Close to Home. I mean, there's a reason why home keeps coming. Like, I'm obsessed with the idea of home. I'm just admitting it. Okay, this is a big theme of mine. But this poem is more, I think, about being at home in the world rather than being at home. And some of us feel more comfortable out in the world than others, depending on where we are. And the only other thing I think you have to know is I talk about, it's called solitary vireo, and that's actually the name of a bird, a solitary vireo. There's different kinds of vireos. This is the solitary vireo. Solitary vireo. I understand why people drive around with their stereos up and their windows down. Sometimes it's not enough to burn alone inside. You want everyone, the world, to feel your heat, char their fingers picking you out of the crowd. But the guy who sells you a scratch ticket drops your change on the counter right next to your upturned palm. And the clerk in the booth at the bank and the gas station and the fast food drive-through shuts off her intercom before you can tell her what you want. Maybe you'll steal from her. Maybe you take your white hot ache, turn it inside out, wave it, snap it open like a toreador's cape. Maybe for a while you feel like a bullfighter, except the bull won't charge. So you go to the park because you always go. And while you're there, some old lady grabs your arm and points. Vireo, she says, Vireo. Jesus, you think, but you're tired. So take her binoculars and look. See the startled round eye of a bird, its chest pushing out notes. You're still looking while the woman reads to you from her book. A common migrant in most of the East, loud song of short, varied phrases repeat. See me, here I am. That poem also reminds me of Dickinson, actually. Something about that vireo reminds me of Dickinson. So I'm going to read two poems and then I will be done. So these are new. And this next one, I guess, is really sort of about that feeling, again, about being out in the world and belonging and maybe not feeling like you belong anywhere. And it's called Where I Might Be. Where I might be. Call it imagination, call it promise, but we know it's an itch. Worse in winter, when dark rides in on monster trucks, smoke, diesel, burning. Then summer, when I'm merely bee drunk on pollen, fragrance, and fruit. I can promise to stay, but we know I'm never in just one place. I tip, right myself, navigate. Blame it on my people who always have to leave. Memories stitched into heavy coats, holes in pockets from all the keys they took with them, just in case, just in case. And let's see. This last poem is a new series that I've been working on that are more like prose poems, which is very unusual for me. And there's a lot of the pandemic in them, I would say. This is, and a lot of them have, the titles are a word with a slash and then another word, which is probably just my indecision, but this one's called Knit / Unravel. I also knitted my anxiety a lot during the pandemic, but I only know how to knit one thing, which is a hat. So I basically either knit a lot of hats or knit and unknit a lot of hats. So knit, unravel. I went looking for snowdrops, wanted proof, even in this winter of limp dregs, yellowed circulars for stores no one visits, clothes with zippers, quiet in the closet, all of us dragging our bodies around through dirty snow, that something new would come the way it's always come. Shrill chorus of spring peepers, red-winged blackbird's brash call. No snowdrops, but the pale stem of one intrepid daylily pushing up through hoarfrost, oak leaves, empties, and plastic nips. Someone on this road needs to hide the evidence. Someone on this road might not want to go home. No snowdrops, but sap buckets on maples, slow drip, fast boil. I sit in the same chair, knit and unknit a hat the color of mint. Sometimes I wonder, who figured it all out? Who thought to tap and evaporate the colorless almost nothing running through trees into something sweet? Who saw sheep and thought sweaters? Who decided to pray? Where does patience come from? No snowdrops, not yet. I walk the loop, knit and unravel, wind yarn back on the ball. Thank you.
All right. Hi, I guess it's me, right? Hi, everybody. I'm Todd Kaneko, and I'm going to read some poems for you. But before I go, I want to thank the Dickinson Museum for hosting this shindig, and to thank Elizabeth and Brooke for manning the booth, and it's an honor to be here with Teri and Amy. So thank you all for inviting me and let me sit with you in these little boxes that we're in on the screen. I'm going to read a few poems from my book, my new book. This is How the Bone Sings. This book is about my family's incarceration in Idaho in a concentration camp during World War II. I'm also going to read a few poems from a new manuscript that I'm working on. And all these poems are, they're kind of about home. I've kind of gone through the chat and I picked out a few poems from the book, to try and, get at some of the themes that I see that people pulling up. So this is How the Bone Sings. One of the, there's some songs in the book, and one of the most important songs to our experience, I think, is the National Anthem. So there's a bunch of poems in here that take from the National Anthem. Oh, say, can you see? America, the place in Seattle where I was born, where I learned to sing angry songs for who we are and where we come from. America, the place in Michigan where my family lives now in a modest house near a park. I sing this song along with the radio on the way to work every morning, along with the jackhammers breaking the freeway into chunks while I drive. America, the place in 1942 where my grandparents once lived. Nothing but crows and barbed wire and shards of us left in the dirt. A concentration camp in Idaho is a song about how to kill people without killing them, about those scars striping a person's insides like tiger skin. America, The hospital room where my father died in Seattle. The hospital room in Grand Rapids where my son was born. And these are both songs about Idaho, about the world we survived and the world we must learn to survive. I sing to the birds at night until they return to the sky that brought them into this world the way snow melts to reveal new potholes in the road. I sing to the ghosts until they recede into hunger each morning, into the sounds of traffic outside. And all of these songs we sing are America, heavy and salt-laden in our mouths. And when we sing, we place one hand on our hearts just to make sure it doesn't stop beating. I woke up this morning to find that this poem was on Verse Daily today, and that's kind of cool because, you know, it's Verse Daily. It's a poem a day. Minidoka was a concentration camp in Idaho. I'm afraid that all my ancestors have gathered my words like birds collect hair from the dead for nesting. An abundance of silence, whole spools of it ready to tether me to the trees. I'm a new father, too young for ghost stories and too fresh to remember what it was like to shiver out on the prairie. I see my own breath sometimes when my son cries at night, and he doesn't have to describe those things he fears in the dark because my grandmother told me the world will never be safe for us when she refused to say the name of that place we come from. Minidoka, I say to him, and my ancestors lay fingers across my lips. Do not be ashamed because we are alive, because the birds will one day pluck us clean. And one of the things that the book does is tries to, imagine my grandparents, my father's life in this camp. And, they never talked about it. It's a lot of silence surrounding that experience. So there's a few love, I have these imagined love poems that my grandfather, and between my grandfather and my grandmother, I read two of those. This is the Ogre's Love Song. We can be anything. You, the huntress, arrows knocked for game. Me, the woodsman, keeping coyotes at bay. I'll carve you a garden from the brambles, a home of those darkest hearts of wood. You can sing to bluebirds, not cobwebs, to clusters of stars instead of the gloomy pallor of dusk. At night, while the porcupines sharpen their bodies against our walls, the elk their antlers at our door, you can be a bright song. And I will become anything to protect us from those fiendish shapes carved for us in the dark. I'll hew an orchard out of the night. And we just have to survive the trees. The Witch's Love Song. I am not like those pale women hunted down and drowned by men who believed too stout in the devil's tongue. Not like those crones set ablaze, mistaken for slaves to their own carnivorous desire. One day we'll be together in an orchard near the sea, far from that skeleton of home we left in the wasteland. I'm not a bird shaped like a woman, not a woman wielding fire or broom, and you were never an ogre, but a man, his insides displaced by wasps and the brief sounds of animals in quicksand. One day we'll be together again in that brand new house you will sculpt out of pine trees and wishbones. Or I will conjure us a house out of those new words the spider has invented for love. We'll be together again once this body has released its secret syllables. I can be a woman, you a man. We'll be safe there. I'm going to read a few poems just from this new manuscript that I'm working on. It's basically about being a father in these fraught times we live in. I have 3 sons. I've got a 5-year-old boy, and then we decided to try and have another child, and ended up with 2 more. This is how to stay safe. When your wife asks if you want another child, tell her that the sun's core is nuclear fusion that will one day consume the earth, that the corner cemetery is wet and full of quiet bodies, There are guns on the news today, a grocery and a synagogue, and a school is no place for children anymore. Your son has a husky wail that cuts through the night. And your life is good, but you don't get enough sleep because no one's ever ready for a body to return to the soil. So stay awake. Drape your arms over their sleeping shapes in the dark. Wait for a light on the horizon. This is When the Twins Are Born. When the twins are born, I'm not thinking about those movie scientists reinventing the dinosaur over and over. A baby is not a thunder lizard, not a tangle of scales and teeth out for an easy meal, but two babies are a swarm of fingernails and hunger for love in the darkest heart of the night. Two babies arrive in the hospital room with an announcement of everything we've been feeling these past few months. Love-starved and panicked for extinction. Extinction in fancy restaurants, in school parking lots, in food courts at the mall, everywhere at once, empty of bodies. And there in the house we never leave unlocked, our oldest son breaks open a fortune cookie, but he hasn't yet learned to read. I remember the first time I held him to your neck, a promise that we'll take care of each other until there's a funeral. We don't care what the future has in store for you, me, our son, and these new babies of ours, like those movie dinosaurs, don't know they're about to be destroyed. Not because they're monsters, but because we made them. Let me see. I'm going to read just three more. This is The bees are a metaphor for everything. The bees are a metaphor for everything we're about to lose, building hives in our ears to make us listen to them talk about last week's school shooting, blossoms blistering perennially in the classroom, the garden's color filling neighborhoods with a tang of smoke and honey. In America, the bees once swarmed like automobiles, cruising ice cream shops, pop songs, sugary on the radio about being together and the sound a heart makes when it breaks. And this is not a poem about America, but about being a father in America, where my son sleeps at night. He breathes heavy, dreams of a monster truck that changes into a giant robot so he can have someone his own size to play with. He says my name like it can keep him safe. My neighbor insists guns don't kill people, but he's talking about bees, a jagged cloud of grief for what hasn't happened, for what might never happen, but will happen over and over. The hearse trying to play the party bus, our kids dancing and singing along with the radio. They say, hey, Dad, watch me turn into a truck. They say, hey, Dad, now watch me turn into a flower. Hey, Dad, we don't ever have to worry about death so long as we have the bees. A bullet saying, look what you made me do. The bees saying, don't forget, we're dying. And we've left you bouquets everywhere. Actually, maybe this will be my last one. Yeah, my neighbor's kid was playing with my son, and my son showed me this new trick that he could do, and it was weird. So I wrote a poem about it. Again, before I read this poem, I just want to say thank you to the Dickinson Museum for hosting us, and for Teri, Ellen, and Amy for sharing poems with me. And thank you to everyone here. Man, there's a lot of people here. It's there's lots we could be doing on a Thursday night, and it's great that we're all here for poetry. This one's called Bear Country. The kid down the street has taught my son to play dead. Eyes squeezed tight, tongue lolling at a cartoonish angle. Play dead, you say, and he plops down belly first in the grass and waits for all our imagined dangers to evaporate. It's cute, but useless. His inexperience at pretending to be a body, because any capable gunman in any school will recognize the rule. will recognize the ruse, and that's that. Maybe there's a grizzly bear in Michigan, in a classroom where children flop to the floor like rag dolls, leaving the bear to lumber away in search of a honey pot or a picnic basket. Call the park ranger, the zookeeper, that dude who wrangles the bear at the country fair, and ask how animals are so easily fooled, how a country is duped into allowing bears to maraud the library, to raid the cafeteria for a slice of pizza and a cowboy cookie. Childhood is brief, too fleeting to ask a 2-year-old to wonder how the dirt nap feels. Let him wonder, let him grow up. Let him grow a beard, move gentle through the wilderness each spring. Let the hunters tremble at his coming. Let them lay down their rifles, admire his gorgeous antlers. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Todd. Thank you, Amy. Thank you both for sharing work tonight. And thank you to the Emily Dickinson Museum for being a place that I treasure and a home to a poet whose work I adore. So two things in one. When I first found out about the title of this poetry series, the fact that it's called Phosphorescence, and when I saw that quote, I had to play around with that quote, and so I did. And here's what I came up with. Behind a word that phosphorescence, light to lift your hat, there's genius to that. Phosphorescence. Now that's the poetry to find within, which is just the quote that they had from Dickinson about phosphorescence. So I want to start off with what I call an address poem, which is a poem that is based on an address. I have two of these, so I kind of think it's a thing anybody can do. So this is called 3939 Strand Hill Road, Cleveland, Ohio. And this takes home literally. It says this was a previous home. Like intruders, we tread cautiously on the icy stone path around the house. This is the landscape of my dreams. The iron gate that safeguarded the patio, rusted and flaking to the ground. Creaking, it acquiesces, announces our entry to the empty yard behind us. We peer through windows just like thieves 45 years ago. My grandfather finding their footsteps in new fallen snow. Now the windows are striped with bars, so we see nothing. The boxy backyard that housed my Barbie's adventures seems smaller, tamer now. This was my father's home, mine. Now it's a listing in the paper. My aunt still has keys. She takes us inside. Under dust, a living room huddles. Sunny tile in the kitchen clashes against the black-white remodeling. Upstairs, in what was once my parents' threshold, my husband hunches awkwardly to fit. I lead him to my old room, but it's no longer pink shell and succor. A boy slept here, I can tell. Still my lips spill story after story, every nick, gouge, crayon score, cracked walls echo back, more hollow than before. I cannot paint the colors right. Can't fill in the laughter, the security, each name carved in wood on the bookcase. Out front, Mommy and I planted tulips, red then yellow, until the squirrels mixed them up. 30 years later, only 2 survive, haggard and slumped, punked by the longer, lingering winter. Grandma's daylilies, her pride, wilt in this nor'easter's grasp. My aunt locks the door behind us. I'm not sure it was good to say goodbye from this close. Back in Maryland, the past was pictures buried in a photo album. Now I am deafened by the din of loss, blinded by April snow. This was the first house our family owned. My grandfather's trust in land, finances, a safety net. Grief unravels my tightrope. I rage at seeing the ground rush up, my center of gravity gone. Now, as we also talk about home, I'm thinking of you, Todd, and your little ones, and my little ones who are not so little now at 10 and 12. But this is from when they were 2 and 4. And this is called Cosleeping. So again, home in the most intimate of places. Years from now, when they are teens, out studying the art of lying, I am told I will treasure this imperfect sleep. 2 and 4-year-old feet in my back and stomach, soft bodies fattened by my milk, such slight impressions they make on a queen-size mattress. My weight, a well sinks them closer. I breathe in the stupor of their sweet rot breath. My children are alive. I taste the words, lull them in my mouth like a chewed pacifier. Each petite exhalation, secure knowledge. I swaddle this fact, fold it tight, tuck in its edges, wrap it again, alive, in this moment, on this night. I burrow in, knowing sleep won't come, but curl around them, a shield, settled and still. Uh, so this is, and then I begin to think about home in some other ways too, and think about home, and then it doubles too during this pandemic as the safest place that my children can be. This is the place where I love them. I know who they are. I see their humanity. And that's not the same that I can say for the world at large. And this is called Knucklehead. And in it, you'll hear the ages of 12, 18, and 43. And you'll know that those are Black boys who didn't get a second chance. Knucklehead. My son's head is a fist rapping against the door of the world. For now, it's dressers, kitchen islands, dining room tables that coax his clumsy, creating small molehills of hurt breaching the surface. The ice pack, a cold kiss to lessen the blow, equals a frigid intrusion. A boy cannot be a boy with all this mothering getting in the way. Sometimes the floor plays accomplice, snagging an ankle, elbow, top lip to swell. Other times it's a tantrum when he spills his limbs onto the hardwood, frenzied then limp with anger, tongue clotted with frustration, a splay of 2-year-old emotion voiced in one winding wail. My son cannot continue this path. Black boys can't lose control at 12, 18, even 43. They don't get do-overs. So I let him flail about now, let him run headfirst into the wall, learn how unyielding perceptions can be, bear the bruising now before he grows, enters a world too eager to spill his blood, too blind to how red it is. And so all of these poems, save one, are all from my, let's remember the camera, is my new book, A More Perfect Union, which just came out last month. So I'm happy to share it with you. So this is another poem about my son. And right now, my kids let me get away with writing about them because I try and balance it. But they're not here right now, so they have no idea I'm reading 2 about my son in a row. No one knows. Don't tell anybody. So this is called Pardus, Sequitur, Ventrum. And that is a Latin phrase that stands for the principle that children of an enslaved woman are themselves born as slaves and owned by their mother's master. It's in 2 parts. The first one is morning. One morning. His knobby 6-year-old knees, his anxious pace as if to keep step with the question's steady overflow. Is there a giant octopus in the Bermuda Triangle? How is paper made? How do fireworks know when to explode? No one told me Black boys could burn so bright. Wait, I am wrong. The dark sky has seen their fire snuffed by white hoods, malevolent blue eyes, and bluer uniforms, white women's screams. All have been matched to their tender wood. So I hug my son tight, kiss the curl crop so close it's straight. My mother eye insatiable. He is dessert, and I'll always have seconds. Each morning I lick my thumb, clean him up good, wishing in vain the amniotic sac had dried to armor. 2, night. His lisp, loose, syrupy sweet, sneaks into my ear. Feel its heat, small source more flicker than flame, flanked by arms still dreaming of muscles. He claims, my squishy stomach, the best pillow. If the security of our locked arms could extend beyond growth spurts, clocks, calendars, to the someone interviewing him, to the someone following him in the store, to the someone holding my son's life in trembling fingers poised above a phone's keypads. Let my love be a note, safety pinned to his chest. Send him back alive, unharmed. As a Black mother in America, I know my wills are birthright, pinned with iron, pinned in ink. And this is a newer one, and this is called The Day's Blur. written for these pandemic times. So again, home as that safe space. The days blur as we self-quarantine to make less work for others. The days blur, the spot on the floor next to my bed, my feet land with a thud, and I am IT director, chef, housekeeper, nurse, and teleworker all before 9 a.m. The days blur, my hand on backs, foreheads, my ears alert for coughing, thermometer at the hip like a gunslinger. The days blur, I touch my husband so I don't forget what it feels like. The days blur from rain or crying, the world a watery vision framed by window panes. The days blur until it's midnight, 1 a.m. I've waited out the cacophony of children for a silence smothered in anxiety. Privilege is a house, the hum of a deep freezer, a steady job. The days blur and my waistband expands as my mind frays, needing a hymn. The days blur and the wound I am oozes, the scab yet to start. The days blur and races fight for the right to be served. Humanity is a bauble and capitalism has slashed the price. The days blur as COVID types its initials on a new high score and doctors adjust the margins. The days blur and when I finally walk out my door, the world will be less, not more. So I'll just share two more with you very quickly. They're both kind of short. So the idea too of home becomes a strange thing when you travel. And as a Black American woman, traveling outside of America is when I feel the most American. So it's interesting because in those moments I'm anxious to get back, but then I have to stop myself. So this poem is called A Black Woman Gets a Window Seat on Aer Lingus, and Aer Lingus is the dominant airline in and out of Ireland. So, enough Ireland. For all your lush effusion of color, inside me blooms a masochistic loneliness. Give me the screws I know best. The policeman quick to test my yes sir as acidless. Trigger the Midwest. Never on the Bible school test was this. Crucifixion kills, not nails into feet or wrists, but the weight borne upon the breast. You suffocate slowly in your own flesh. As I return to the upright cross of the US, I breathe easier, I breathe less. And I'll end it with this poem, which is about me leaning into anger which I feel is more than justified. Because what happens when home is a country that says it loves you but doesn't act that way? What happened when home is a country that everyone you know has died to make happen, but is yet to realize how much you mean to it. This poem suggests revolution. And I think the best thing you can do about a home that you love is to criticize it and make sure it becomes better. So this has some strong language. So I will preface that. So here we are. This poem suggests revolution. And again, thank you to everyone for such a wonderful night. I always love to have time for poetry, and you all's work have been it's just been inspiring. This poem suggests revolution. This poem no longer consents to play mammy or to wet nurse a seething rage at her own black teeth. America, your teeth have come in. You nip too much. This poem refuses to play religion. A Bible verse will not absolve you, America. If the pursuit of happiness, life, and liberty came from the Creator, she's about ready to backhand you in the face. This poem will not be your bottom bitch, America. This poem does not consent to Blackness being window dressing for the diversity brochure of a country where the board of directors never changed. This poem reads the fine print on you, America. This poem consents to be black ink, a clenched fist, pepper spray, and Black souls marching on asphalt, freedom for and from you, America. If need be, this poem consents to double as witness, the dotted I in the missing reparations decree. Until then, let this poem heckle you, America. Let it yell, goddamn US, choke on cotton, while fanning itself and the flames. Understand, this poem doesn't want to be bloodthirsty. It would rather write about the cleanse of a cloudburst than the vengeful force of a water hose. In truth, this poem courts hope. Like a Volta, it wants to turn the page writing, America, let us pen a new document, not a perpetual union, but a chokehold removed, as a Black throat breathing freely is a self-evident truth. Let these lines be facts submitted to a candid world. And this poem, when spoken or read, let it alter, let it abolish you. Thank you so much.
Oh my goodness. Thank you so much to our just dynamite set of poets this evening. It's been a real thrill to be back here in this space with all of you, and I just feel so honored to be with you tonight. This is the point we're have just about 10 more minutes probably together, and this is a great time if you have any burning questions to put in the Q&A for our poets this evening. I'm going to go ahead and put us all into a view where we can see all of our poets' faces. And remember that the Q&A is at the bottom of the screen. You're welcome to put all of your, and thank you for all these lovely comments that are coming into the chat. We will definitely share these with the poets as well. But if you have questions, pop them into the Q&A. And Elizabeth is going to start us off with a question for this group.
Yes, thank you. And wow, I just have to say, all of your poems are so incredible. I love being part of this reading. Just to start, Teri, your address poem actually reminded me a lot of a Dickinson poem that begins, years have been from home, and now before the door I dared not open, lest a face I never saw before stare vacant into mine. So it's an experience, just as you described, of going back to a family home that isn't yours anymore. And I was so struck by how all of your poems touch on how our sense of home today is informed by our ancestral homes and our family history, including homes that have been left behind or lost or taken from us. So can you maybe each speak more to how your family history has informed your meaning of home and its presence in your poems?
I can go first, I guess. So my first, my dad is a poet, Lonnie Kaneko. My first exposure to poetry was really reading his poems. It might have been actually a Robert Louis Stevenson book, but I don't know if I count that because my dad's poems are more important to me. He wrote about his mom and dad being in Minidoka, and I remember that sort of learning about the internment, learning about all of that happening through those poems more than I learned anything from school, because we just didn't, we didn't cover it really back then. I'm not even sure if we cover it now, but so my first exposures to poetry were my family history. And it's something that I associate very closely with poetry. When I think of poems, I'm, 99% of the time I'm thinking of my dad. And the other 1% of the time I'm probably thinking about my dad and my son. So it's really just, for me, poetry springs from my life. My life is informed by those relationships, my family relationships.
I'll jump in there to say that poetry has often been my home, because my mother taught me to read to poetry. She taught me to read to Nikki Giovanni's work early on. My husband is a poet, so we had poetry as part of our wedding, and as part of our wedding souvenirs, we had little scrolls of all of our favorite love poems, from Elizabeth Barrett Browning to Shakespeare to Sonia Sanchez. Got to throw them all in there, it just, so I have created a home with my husband that's full of words. It's full of a love of literature, and it's always the place that I feel the most accepted is in a poem or in the world of poetry, where I don't have to, thanks to places like Cave Canem in Hedgebrook, where you get to be yourself. And I think of places like Kundiman, and I think of Letras Latinas and Canto Mando. Just there's so many places where now there's so many places they were not there. But now there are places that accept you as the kind of weird, quirky poet you are, and you don't have to hide that flag anymore. So.
Yeah, I think that for me, I actually don't have that much family. A lot of our family died. Like a lot of our family were killed in one pogrom or extermination or another. We have family who died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. We have, poor people tend to die a lot more than other people. And so I think that my sense of family has extended a lot to my friends, because I don't have that many blood relatives that are living. My own parents died pretty young. And that I'm always trying in my work to figure that out. Like as I mentioned, like I feel like most of my poems are investigating the idea of belonging in one way or another, and whether that's a physical or psychological, emotional belonging or not, and what it means to stay and be accepted. And if you're accepted, does that mean that you accept? Because I think there's also a lot of resistance in my poems to what we are expected to accept in order to be accepted. If that makes any sense at all.
We had so many wonderful, I think, connections to Dickinson that could be found in your poetry tonight. Of course, we talk about the homestead, the Emily Dickinson Museum, the homestead and the Evergreens, as the place that Emily Dickinson called home, where she, of course, found her poetic inspiration in the stuff of daily life. We have a couple people who would love to know if you could speak a little more to your connection to Dickinson, and perhaps any poem of hers that maybe continues to inspire you.
I guess, I don't know how you are a poet and are not inspired, not, affected by Dickinson in some way. She's, if not directly, then, there's at least, maybe by 1 or 2 degrees of separation. You love a poet who is inspired by Dickinson, or you love a poet who's inspired by a poet who is in love with Dickinson, right? There's a lineage there that I think that we can't escape, not that we're trying to escape it. I was thinking about this earlier today, how if I'm thinking about Dickinson, I don't think I write particularly Dickinsonian poems, but I don't live in the same time and place that she lived. I don't know that anyone is really writing stuff that's 100% Dickinsonian. If I think of it, my favorite Dickinson poem, it is probably the Hope is a Thing with Feathers. It's like the best bird poem, because it's the best bird, hope. So
I'm always thinking about, let me tell you how the sun rose one ribbon at a time, the steeple swarming purple, in ribbons of amethyst. And it's just like, because every day that I see a sunset or a sunrise, anytime I can, I think of that poem, and my husband and I, we tend to quote it back and forth for just a couple lines. The more he remembers, the more I remember when we read it back and forth. Yeah, I know. It's like, it's such a poety thing to do. But what I love about Dickinson is there's a freshness to me in her approach to the world, and how she breaks language down and creates spaces with those dashes, those M dashes. I think anytime I see an M dash in a poem, I'm thinking, yeah, I know where you got that. Yes, it's on every keyboard, but she had a way of using them to sustain that emotion and carry it, and to carry a thought from line to line. And it just, so I think whenever I think about innovation, I think about Dickinson too, because I feel like she was a poet who was willing and ready to do her own thing, even if it wasn't the most popular thing at the time. But she was doing what felt organic in her, and I think and organic and truthful to her. And I think that that's always inspiring. And I will say that, let me tell you how the sun. There are favorites, but that one comes up a lot in my life.
For me, I think of The Brain is Wider Than the Sky, because I feel like that's, what you said, Teri, about those M dashes. Like, I feel like, sometimes I bear down on my poems too much. Like I put a little too much pressure on those poems and not leaving enough space. And Dickinson, like, there's all this space, right? And that invites us to like get inside those poems and be in those poems and figure it out. And like, she confuses the crap out of me, to be completely honest. But that's okay. Like, I don't feel like I need to know the answer to those poems. And for me, it's a goal to have some, at least like a tiny bit of that openness in my work, I think is a goal.
Heft them pound for pound, and they will differ if they do as syllable from sound. Yeah, all three of those poems are, of course, real favorites, I think, for some of us who work at the museum too. We are have arrived at our time, so I think I'm going to go ahead and draw us to a close, knowing that we could probably sit here and talk Dickinson all night and talk about how wonderful your poetry reading was tonight. Amy Dryansky, Teri Ellen Cross Davis, W. Todd Kaneko. Our sincerest gratitude to you for spending your evening with us, with all of these fine folks who have showed up to listen to your wonderful work. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience. Thank you to these poets. These poets have books, and you should be sure to buy them. And so head over to amherstbooks.com. That's the preferred bookseller of this series, our local independent bookstore, or head to your own local independent bookstore where you are and find their work there. We hope that you will join us again for more of our upcoming remote programs. April is National Poetry Month, right around the corner. So we will be running a virtual tour of the Emily Dickinson collection at the Houghton Library at Harvard University. That's going to be really fun to look at. And then, of course, we're going to be bringing you the next installment of Phosphorescence, which features Jennifer Franklin, Philip F. Clark, Fred Marchant, and Mervyn Taylor. So to learn more about our programs, to sign up for our monthly mailing list so that you never miss a program, or to make a donation, you can head over to emilydickinsonmuseum.org. Until we see you again, we hope you take good care of yourselves and of each other. Good night, everybody. Thank you again. Be well.